Welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening if you're watching me live or if you're watching on tape, doesn't matter. I'm Brett, I'm your host today, and I'm here to answer your startup questions. So if you're watching live, you can put your questions in the chat box. And as usual, I have a topic of the day, which we'll start with, and then I have some questions which I've already gotten, and then I'll get to your questions next. The topic of today is this: tolerance is a decision. And you'll understand what I mean by tolerance in just a minute. So, one of the things that I loved to do when I was CEO was do this old technique that the Hewlett Packard people invented called management by walking around. Probably somebody else did it before them, but I'll give them the credit. And the concept is really simple. You just go walk around your office, your facility, your whatever, and start talking to your team. Learn about them, talk to them, ask them what they're up to, challenges, whatever. And on one particular Friday afternoon, I was doing this and I was talking to people at their desks. And I happened by a fellow who we'll call Chris, and I happened by his desk. And before he could see me, I saw pornography on his computer. And then he saw me and he immediately flicked it off. And, I had a choice to make in that moment. Do I ignore it or do I do something about it? Because these are kind of like the moments of truth. And I could pretend that I didn't see it, as I said, or I could deal with it. And interesting enough, Chris was one of our better employees. So he was a really good team member. And this is where, as CEO, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. When you have somebody that's really talented, somebody that's really productive, then confronting them with bad behavior can become really inconvenient. And when you ignore something because it's uncomfortable, it can become even more inconvenient. So I finished walking around the facility and then I got back to my office and I immediately called Chris and I said, "Can you come to my office for a minute?" And then I told him exactly what was going on. I told him I saw the pornography and that was just something that in our company just violated all of our cultural rules. We just couldn't have it. And I told him in no uncertain terms that if it happened again, then he would no longer be an employee of the company. That was that. I smiled and said, now get back to work. Don't worry about it. Just don't do it again. And then I immediately told his manager she was out for the day and I let her know what was going on so that she knew. So there was no surprises anywhere in the management change. So this is where tolerance comes in, because there's really something important to understand about tolerance. It isn't neutral. When you ignore behavior, excuse me, you're teaching your team what your real standards are and what they aren't. It's not what you say, it's what you allow to have happen. And this is where you slowly but surely lose your culture if you're not careful, because you lose it when you start ignoring behavior. When you tolerate disrespect, when you tolerate underperformance, when you tolerate cutting corners, and when you tolerate people violating your culture. Now, you can tell yourself, oh, it's not a big deal, it's just porn or whatever, but that's not the point. You've dropped your standards. And the second you drop your standards, even for a moment, you haven't just changed the culture, changed it forever. And getting it back to where you want it to be is, I will say, virtually impossible. It's very, very difficult to do. So that's why tolerance is a decision. So now let's go to your questions. If you have a question for me, you can put it in the chat box and I'm going to answer The first question that we have today, which you're going to see a theme with some of these questions, I think. The first one is, what's the best way to deal with stress as a CEO? So here's the thing about stress and being a CEO. The stress never, ever, ever goes away. In my experience and in my journey, there were weeks where I was under so much stress that I slept maybe 2 or 3 hours a night. And then there were times when I would go for walks in the middle of the day just to get out of the office and walk around during a very stressful period. And it would be 80 degrees out, so reasonably warm out. And I was shivering because I was so stressed out. And it wasn't because I was doing anything wrong. It was because I was carrying a ton of responsibility all on my shoulders. And if you think that there's going to come a point where everything is calm when you're running a company, and that's the point when you can really perform well, that moment may never, ever, ever, ever come. So it isn't about reducing the stress, I would say that. It's about how do you operate while there is stress. So here's the things that help. Having a routine helps. Exercise absolutely helps. Meditation, which is something I learned later, really helps. And having mentors, somebody you can talk to outside of the office, absolutely helps too. Now, these things build capacity. The reality is that the job isn't going to get any easier for you. It's just that you get stronger and you have better tools available to you to help you on the job. Let's go to our next question, which, as you can see, our theme here. What is my worst memory of being a CEO? So being a CEO, I would say, is really interesting because if you haven't figured this out already, you will soon enough, that you can do everything well. You can execute really well, and you can still lose your company if you're not careful. And even if you are careful, you can still lose your company. So my worst memory wasn't like a failure on our part. It wasn't a product failure or something like that. It was almost losing our company because an investor blocked our funding. One of our existing investors, it's a longer story and I'm not going to bore you with it, but we were raising funding and this particular investor decided to block the round from going through. Company was doing really well. Our revenue was growing. Customers were coming in at a really good clip. So didn't make a hell of a lot of sense what this guy was up to, but he was doing it and he could do it. And none of it mattered in terms of how well we were doing. And you learn something difficult in times like this, and that is that you're not in control of everything as much as you want to be, as much as you think you are. And it doesn't relieve you, despite the fact that you don't have all the control you want, it doesn't relieve you of the responsibility that you have as the leader. You don't get to say it's unfair. You have to get back to work and you have to figure out how to overcome the obstacle, whatever it is. So you find another path, which is what we did. Maybe the path will work out, maybe it won't, but that's your responsibility, is to do whatever you can do. So the job of being CEO isn't about control. It's about staying steady when the control disappears. So we'll go to our next question. What is the biggest challenge you'll face as a startup CEO? So when you're building a startup, you're going to realize that a lot of it isn't about the technical challenge that you're going to face, whatever it is that you're trying to build, be it a technology, be it a medical device, be it software, doesn't matter what it is. Even if it has, there's no technical piece to it at all. It's not the product, the end result. That's not the challenge. The reality is that the challenges are that you're going to get a lot of the people decisions, despite your best efforts, wrong. We had a lot of things going for us in terms of recruiting. We knew a lot of people in our industry. We could recruit through our team. We could recruit through our contacts. We could recruit through trusted sources. And we had worked with a lot of the people that we brought on before. And you figure, okay, this makes things easier for you. And the reality is, even with all those advantages, things still don't work because it's a new environment. You don't know how people are going to act in the new environment. That's an interesting piece of this. And you don't know whether they will succeed or fail, despite the fact that you have experience with these people previously. So the mistake isn't hiring wrong. The mistake is seeing the misalignment. This is the key piece here, is when something goes wrong and you recognize that somebody isn't good, what do you do? Do you ignore it? Do you just hope it gets better? Or do you do something about it? That's the thing to think about. Because if you don't do anything about it, there's an inevitability of things that are going to happen. And you don't want those things to happen. And everything will start getting worse, not instantly, but slowly over time. And yet again, it's hard to recover from these things. That's the challenge. Okay, do we have any other questions? We can put those in the chat box for me, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Okay, looks like we don't have any other questions today, which is great and fine. So I will be back again next week to answer your questions. So if you haven't already, and you want a community where you can get the help you need and start moving yourself towards raising the funding for your company and moving your company forward, then join my free community. It is free for life, zero to pitch. There's the QR code, just scan it, answer a couple questions, and you are in for life. And that will get you a foundational level of your business. And when you get to that, if you want to get to what I'll call investor ready, which is when you're really truly ready to raise money and you have all the things laid out for you, to do that, you've got a great pitch deck, you have a great pitch, and you're somebody that investors are going to want to work with for the next 7 to 10 years of your life, then you can join my paid community, Zero to Pitch Gold, from there. So with that, I will say it's great seeing you all. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great day. Bye.